Number 1. So I guess I'll just jump right into it. When I walked into my room for the first time in freshman year, I saw my new roommate standing in the middle of the room, screaming at his dad. He was yelling about not wanting to go, and how he blamed his mum for writing his college essay and filling out the application. The father kept calling my new roommate an ungrateful piece of shit, and threatening to beat the shit out of him if he tried to leave. It was right after he finished speaking that they realized I was in the room. They both pretended like nothing had happened, shook my hand and introduced themselves. Luckily, my parents had not walked in with me, so they didn't have to see that and be worried. Eventually, my parents met his as they helped me set up in the room, and talked about how proud they were of us. My new roommate's dad kept saying things like, "It's either college or the street, 'cause I'm not paying to support a failure." My parents, of course, thought he was joking. Every day, my new roommate, who I'll now call Eduardo, told me how much he hated school. He would never go to class, drink in the room all day with the door open, and we were a dry campus. He'd scream at everyone, party all night, and generally just be a dick. He used to watch VH1 every night until 4 AM, with the volume cranked up so loud you couldn't even hear. When I asked him to turn it down because I couldn't even hear myself think, he said he would if I would wrestle him. Turns out he was serious. He wanted to wrestle me because of me asking him to turn down that Bret Michaels Rock of Love show. I declined and tried to go to bed. The next day, he called his mum to come and get him, and she agreed and said she was getting in the car. She never came, and he lost his shit. He broke everything he owned, punched a hole through his TV, slammed his Guitar Hero controllers on the ground repeatedly, threw his Xbox out of the window, cracked his cell phone in half, ripped his bed sheets. He basically totaled his side of the room. I had left the room during all this, and assumed he was just blowing off steam, not knowing he was breaking all his shit. I walked back into a fucking war zone, with him just standing in the middle of the room, crying and drinking laundry detergent, yelling about how he wanted to die, and how he took a whole bottle of Advil after breaking his stuff. I ran to get the RA, and he ran and took the broken glass and plastic shards from his computer monitor, and started cutting his wrists. The RA and I re-entered the room to this kid, throwing up detergent and bleeding. Cops and paramedics were called. They fed him charcoal to stop him from dying due to detergent. He left that night, woke me up to say goodbye. The last thing he said to me? "Goodbye, Jay. Sorry about ruining your birthday." After he left, I needed a new roommate. The guys across the hall were tripled in a room made for two, so I invited one of them to live with me. He accepted, the RD agreed, and less than 2 weeks later, he was all moved in. This new guy was great. We really hit it off and became fast friends. And he begins to tell me how Eduardo still texts him. Apparently, he still texted everyone in the rooms near mine. Now, I really don't care, because who am I to say who he can and can't text, as long as it didn't involve me. My new roommate, who I'll call Bill, is a pretty sociable person, and has long since made friends with all the neighbours. I always wanted to make friends with the people around us, but having Eduardo as a roommate made it incredibly difficult to. His train of thought was, if they were his friends, they couldn't be mine under any circumstances. Honestly, looking back on this, I guess I kind of acted like an abused wife or something. I'd gotten so used to him being a dick that I just quietly sat in my room playing video games, afraid to be sociable for fear of awaking the beast. Anyway, Bill introduced me to the neighbours, and we all became good friends. And it was once this friendship blossomed that they began to admit to me that not only was Eduardo still texting them, but that he was becoming more and more angry towards me. He would text them how things would have been better if I had left and not him, and how he'd made some mistakes and wished he could come back. It was at this point that he had texted Bill and told him, "Hey man, I'm gonna come visit for the weekend. I'm taking my old bed while I'm there." It was at this point that I nutted up and decided enough was enough. I called him, since I still had his number saved on my phone, and flat out told him he was not welcome in my room. I said he was welcome to come and get his stuff that he had left behind that had survived his episode, which was basically only his mini fridge, but there was no way I was letting him stay in the room for longer than it took to get that fridge, because of the fact that he was a downright horrible person. He flipped the fuck out. He started screaming into the phone how I was the greasiest piece of shit slimeball he'd ever called a friend. I said, "Sorry, goodbye," and hung up. He tried calling, texting, and IMing me, but I ignored all of it and blocked him. It was at this point he started commenting on everything I'd ever done on Facebook ever, and I do mean ever, all with the same word: faggot. Hundreds of notifications. Finally, he stopped, and I thought it was over. Then, suddenly, Bill gets a text that says, "Dude, fuck Jay. He won't say no after this." Bill asks him what he means, and Eduardo responds with, "I've got my dad's gun case keys. I'll see you in an hour." I've never run away faster than I have to the police station that day. I explained the situation, and they called a cop from his area to speak with him and his parents. They assured me that nothing was going to happen, and that he was probably just pissed and needed to blow off some steam. Turns out, the cops got to his house as he was getting in the car. He had his dad's shotgun under the passenger's seat. I called my family. They drove out and we had a meeting with the police. Eduardo's mother drove out to the school too and met with us. She pleaded that her son needed help and that if I had him arrested, he could never change. My parents kept urging me to press charges, but the look in Eduardo's mum's eyes was so sad that I told her I wouldn't, if he got help. And once again, everything was fine. For about a week. Halloween night rolls around, and due to my job on campus, I can't go out partying. My job consists of sitting at a desk and checking ID cards between 11 PM and 4 AM to make sure everyone who enters actually lives in the building. Well, I was informed that joining me and my work partner would be 2 troopers. They told me it was because the drunken shenanigans on Halloween tend to get more rowdy than 2 students could handle. I thought that was pretty badass, and spent the whole night checking the ID cards of kids dressed up in costumes, trashed out of their skulls. But around 3 AM, one of the officers pulls me aside and says he has to tell me something. It turns out, the real reason that they were there that evening was because Eduardo was seen in the area, and they needed to make sure I was safe while they found him. Apparently, kids are harder to identify when they're all in costume. Who knew? The officer then told me they had found him on the campus at around 2 AM. He had been hiding in the service entrance to my dorm building. He was carrying a knife. This time I was not so lenient, and I did press charges. Among other things, he's now not allowed within 2 miles of campus, which essentially makes him unable to be in the town that the school is located in. It's been about 4 years now, but I still remember every detail vividly. Number 2. Please note, this next story is from a female's perspective. This is a story about a roommate that my boyfriend and I had many years ago, when we first started college. His name was Bob. We'd been friends with this guy for about a year. He was a character with a lot of interesting quirks, but nothing that seemed really dangerous at first. First of all, he was amazingly creative. He was a great artist, and could also pick up a musical instrument he'd never even played before, and figure it out in a couple of hours, which was very impressive. He had an amazing ability to focus. One crazy thing he could do was to pick flies straight out of the air. He'd get this intense look on his face as he watched the fly, then slowly approach it and bam, pinch it right out of the air in mid-flight. He also liked to burn things. Often we'd be kicking back and suddenly there'd be the smell of burning hair or something. There he'd be, sitting over the ashtray, burning something he'd found, with the same intense look of concentration on his face. Once, someone brought over this big stand-up cardboard Easter bunny. We didn't have it for an hour before we noticed smoke coming from the front yard. There he was, watching the bunny burn. In retrospect, there were some things that indicated something was wrong with him, beyond his quirky behaviour. A couple of times he accidentally hurt my dog, by shutting his leg in the door or carelessly grazing him with a lit cigarette. Once he was cat-sitting for a friend of mine, but her cat mysteriously disappeared. Another girl I knew claimed that he had tried to bury her puppy under a shed. They liked crawling under there to sleep, and then he filled in the entrance. But then again, he and she had a kind of weird history, so I believed him when he denied it. So, one day, some friends of ours come over to our house while we weren't home. They caught him picking up and throwing one of our dogs, hurting her just for fun. I confronted him over this, and I was naturally pretty upset. He told me in a completely matter-of-fact way that he'd decided to conduct an experiment that he'd been working on for a while. He said he wanted to see if he gave my dogs only bad attention and pain, whether they would learn to enjoy it. He acted like this was a totally normal, rational explanation. What the fuck? I told him that that was crazy, and asked him where he'd come up with such a horrible excuse for torturing my dogs. After some argument, he admitted that while he was doing an experiment, he really did enjoy seeing the look of fear in their eyes when he hurt them. He also admitted to me that he had similar desires to do the same to women, though he hadn't acted on them yet. Again, with these confessions, he didn't seem at all remorseful. He said it all in that same tone that you'd typically tell someone you'd decided to take some painting classes, or something mundane like that. Needless to say, we made Bob move out, and stopped hanging out with him. I don't know everything he did to our dogs when we weren't home for the 6 months that he lived with us. I did hear from a mutual friend that when he found out that our dog had puppies, he was surprised that she could still get pregnant after what he did to her. Pretty disgusting. I wouldn't be surprised to see his name in the papers as being a serial killer someday. Number 3. Please note, this final story is also from a female perspective. Back in my younger days, when I was still living with roommates, I had what turned out to be the most obvious of dangerous encounters. I was looking to move, and I was about to leave to see a place in the perfect location, good price, 2 seemingly professional male roommates. At the last minute, my boyfriend suggested that he comes along as well, because the place is nearby, and they'll have to meet him at some point anyway. We get there, and I introduce myself, and the one roommate who opens the door seems a little taken aback that I have someone with me. I suppose it could be seen as a little unusual to bring your boyfriend, but I figured, oh well, The damage has already been done. If they don't allow me to be their roommate simply because he's with me, I can't do anything about it now. Let's just see the place. The apartment was huge. We're both suitably impressed, until we turn the corner of the living room, and we see it. A 2-camera setup, with a light pointing at the couch. There's a guy sitting on the couch, who is introduced as the other roommate. He jumps off the couch and gives my boyfriend the same weird look. I now realize the look they were giving was disappointment. I shoot my boyfriend a very quick look of understanding, but we silently decide to continue with the tour so as not to escalate the situation. I casually joke that it's nice that they have a camera so I can videotape myself for my auditions. They both laugh much too hard and say, "Yes, that's what we were doing." He brings us over to, quote-unquote, my room, and it's literally a broom closet. You wouldn't even be able to fit a single-sized bed in there. It is now blatantly obvious there was never a room to rent in the first place. I take this opportunity to get out of there by saying, "Oh, that's too bad. I have a queen bed, and it won't be able to fit. Okay, well, thanks for your time." We get out onto the street and walk around the corner without saying a word. When we finally look at each other, it's this stunned silence. Just to be clear, this all happened about 20 years ago. They weren't filming for YouTube or anything like that. He just hugged me really tight, and we went for a walk in the park. Why, hello Lazy Legion, it's Lazy Masquerade here, and thank you very much for watching the video. Or at the very least, just listening in and tolerating my voice. If you have any of your own horrible experiences with roommates, scary, disturbing, disgusting, or whatever, why not let me know about them by leaving them in the comments below, or emailing them to me at lazymasquerade@gmail.com. I'd love to read about them, and who knows, if you send them in to me, I might even read them out in a future episode. If you enjoyed this one, that is, make sure to leave a like if you did, so you let me know, that you enjoyed this particular video, and I might make a sequel. Make sure to subscribe and join the Lazy Legion, for we are many. And you can find links to my other social media outlets in the description as well, along with links to Anthony's artwork. He does some terrific stuff, guys, including the thumbnail for this video, and basically every other video I've done as well. He's a truly amazing artist, so make sure to check him out and show him some love. Until the next video, stay spooky, and remember, the best things happen in the dark.